I had cut out an article from quite some time ago in which you were a featured,
Yes, sir.
Paul was a featured person in this. And this whole thing was all about paying college athletes. And well, let's also use that as a segue, Kevin and Jeff, to the fact that there's some talk. In fact, it was Northwestern University, I think, about unionizing sports. And they had a vote. They were going to have a vote way back there in like April or May. Did they ever have a vote, and what came out of it?
They did, but it was never publicized what the outcome of that vote was. So
So the answer is yes, but we don't know?
The actual outcome of the vote has remained confidential, so nobody knows how that team actually voted.
Okay, so
That's my understanding.
Okay, we'll make you the feature of this, and then Jeff
Sure.
and Kevin can. You came out fairly strongly about this. You indicated should Division I college athletes be paid? Why or why not? And then came down on the side of the concept of being paid to participate in college athletics is antithetical to me personally and professionally. Why?
Some of it's my background, some of it's my viewpoint, my philosophical viewpoint on sports and college athletics and what it means, and I think it's a privilege, not a right, to be a student athlete, particularly at this level. I do believe there's value, inherent value, intangible value is also financial value in terms of the scholarships that athletes can receive, and I think there's great value to that. So I just don't see the place for it, but I do believe, as an athletics director in Division I, and I alluded to the changes that are forthcoming, I do believe we have to figure out how to manage this cost of attendance issue that's going to pass. It's the NCAA convention is coming up in mid-January, and some iteration of that will pass. So we all have to figure out how we're going to deal with that and manage that. And if we want to stay together as a Division I entity, then the people at my level have to figure out how we're going to manage that. So there's some realities to that, and philosophically, I'm not opposed to a cost of attendance aspect to a scholarship. I just don't believe student athletes are employees, or they should just be paid as such.
Kevin?
Love Paul, and we agree on much of this because we both have a Division III background, and I have 3 kids to put through college, and I'd love to think one of them will get a nickel for sports. Probably not going to happen, but I disagree at the highest level, and I know it's hard to differentiate highest level, but I think when you're talking about football and basketball, major college sports, and coaches making upwards of $3, $4, and $5 million, that these athletes need to get something more than the scholarship, personally. They're not the same as the field hockey player, the swimmer, the soccer player. We're talking about hundreds of millions, billions of dollars.
In revenue.
If we're going to have it such that it's just scholarship, then fine. Nick Saban should make the same as every other Division I coach. If Nick Saban can,
Coach of Alabama.
Coach of Alabama,
$4 to $5 million a year.
probably $7 million a year. Probably
Okay.
could have made
Yes,
$10
more
million
like
a year at Texas. I often hear, well, how do we differentiate? Well, how do we differentiate anything? How do any of us get paid? We get paid based on what we bring to the table. I understand this complicates things immensely. I understand the union issue, but with smart people, I think it can be figured out. There has to be something. You want to have a cap like the NFL has, some type of salary cap, fine. But I think you have to differentiate. The money's obscene. It's not what it was 30 and 40 years ago. This isn't the NESCAC or the Ivy League. When you're talking about SEC football and the amount of money that's
Got their own
exchanged,
channel.
$100 handshake doesn't do it anymore. I want the $10,000 handshake, but I want it legalized and in an upfront way. I just think if coaches can get paid that way, then the players should get skin in the game.
I'm sure you have an opinion, Jeff.
I'll give him like 2 words that headline it before I go on a complete rant. Greed and football. Those are the 2 words to remember. Greed, football. Zillions of dollars come from television to football. And if we want to decide that the student athlete term is a sham, then maybe there just shouldn't be college sports for a finite number of colleges who want to employ them, want to pay them, want to run them. Make them just like the janitor or the biology professor and pay them and contract them, because that's what they're doing practically now. And then let's see if we can make it work financially through the schools that want to have student athletes, because I don't want to dismiss it. Because Division III sports are a beautiful thing. The Ivies have lowered their standards in some ways in acceptance. It's a beautiful thing. And just because the stink and the stench that is in the Southeast Conference, schools bringing in billions and having 14 and 15, the University of Connecticut has like 10 or 7 more sports than some of these sports down in Southeast Conference that have a zillion dollars to throw around. So the shame should not be put on the notion of student athleticism just because some don't want to play by student athleticism. And ESPN has done none of us a favor. They run bowl cartels. They finance so much of this. And so the linchpin here, though, after using those two terms, is the college basketball tournament, because that is where
NCAA tournament.
NCAA tournament, because that pays the NCAA. That's what makes it go. The football money's long gone. That's what makes it. If they can continue to run that tournament, there may be, believe it or not, some semblance of college athleticism, academic and athleticism, which unfortunately also brings in guys that only want to play for 1 year in school. And
Jeff, I'm going to have to stop you there for 2 reasons. Reasons number 1 is when I go back to your hobby, that your favorite hobby is avoiding heart attacks, I'm going to do you a medical favor and stop you. What do you think, Kevin? That's my Samaritan act today.
I appreciate
I noticed, Paul, how he started out very measured, but once he got going, he lost control of himself. But you had a lot of good quotes in there, Jeff. I
thank
tell
you.
you
I
that right
appreciate
now.
it.
Listen, let's come to the state level, all right? And let's talk about sports at the state level. I've done and still do a lot of traveling in my business life, and I've got a place in Florida, in Vero Beach, Florida. And when I go down there, every once in a while I go to a high school game, I go to a college game, but especially the high school games, et cetera. There is such a marked difference, Paul. When you go to various areas of this country in sports, it is incredible. Starting at high school, where every day in the Vero Beach Journal, Jeff, there is an 8-page sport page. 8 pages of sports. 7 of them are high school. Every sport in the world, and of course the reason they do is because they got great weather down there, right, Kevin?
Sure.
But when I look at how people feel about, and I'm firing a little bit for effect and generalizing a little bit, how people feel about sports in the Northeast versus the Deep South versus the Midwest versus the Far West, what do you think is the reason for that? The feeling about sport. Religion versus we don't really have to have it.
I tend to think there's equal passion in different geographic areas. I just think it's proportional. I think Texas has a name for producing high school football players, and
Right.
Florida as well a little bit, and maybe baseball players, and Indiana for basketball, and some of the upstate New York is lacrosse. So maybe there's some association with certain sports in certain areas, maybe because of the size and how many players they produce. But I don't think in the state of Connecticut necessarily, and I'll use the one that pops into my mind, and the town of Ansonia is any less passionate about their football program than perhaps one of the biggest towns in Texas. Maybe Texas has a 10,000 seat stadium and Ansonia
Actually,
doesn't.
30.
Right.
I just think it's proportion. I think it's part of the fabric of our culture that people are passionate about sports and passionate about high school sports, and I think their towns are as well.
Okay.
And I would argue in Vero Beach, they probably don't have big lacrosse, swimming, field hockey. We have diversity in Connecticut. Yes, if you're in Florida, if you're in Texas, if you're in certain pockets of Pennsylvania, if you're Ansonia and you have a pulse, you're probably going out for high school football.
Yeah.
I live in Glastonbury. My son's a swimmer.
Got great
He's
teams there.
6'3". If we lived in a coal mining town in Pennsylvania, they would have grabbed him in 7th grade and said, "You're going to be a football player," and there wouldn't have been a discussion. I think in Connecticut we have a lot of different opportunities, and I think kids pursue those.